Welcome to the Tism. Here are your hosts, Carrie Thorne-Kenny and Joey Murphy. The Lucy and Ethel of Autism.
Now's a good time if we were to ask anybody who's listening. One of the things we want to do is share stories. Like Carrie and I are very committed to the power of narrative and sharing stories. And so we've come up with a couple different types of stories that we would love to collect and share.
Yeah, your voices.
Yeah. Give us your diagnosis story. Give us
Yeah, I would love to hear it.
your favorite workaround for working with NTs. Tell us a story about the worst dickery you've experienced with a neurotypical. Basically, we want to hear your stories. Tell us the story of your special interest. We're hoping to have a section where people present their special interests as though it was a Whammo product. Give us a commercial for it.
Yeah, but you know what? Have you ever met an autistic person that you didn't like?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's sort of like that's the diagnostic tool. If I'm out there walking around, if I like you and we're having an easy time together and I don't feel judged,
Ding, 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 ding,
yeah,
ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
Underwritten by L. Sack. Clothes for the discerning woman. 100% natural fibers with no tags, no seam, and no discernible shape. Is it pants? Is it a top? Is it a giant knitwear bag? We'll never tell. L. Sack.
Please join us now for Memoir Moment. So we started this podcast. We've been talking about it for like a year. And we finally got around to it. But it all kind of came out from 8 or 9 years ago. We reconnected. And you diagnosed me with... Yeah, but you diagnosed me with autism. Yeah,
the obvious.
The obvious. And but
by the way your zipper's down, by the way you're on the spectrum.
You're autistic.
Far over on the spectrum.
I don't know if you know this, but
you're super autistic, Joey. You're got autism.
And when we think about childhood, it is like bleedingly obvious now.
Bleedingly obvious.
How did people not know? But so you diagnosed me, and I did follow up with a formal diagnosis, and you were correct. Dr. Carey.
Well, I identified you.
Yeah.
I identified you.
You confirmed some suspicions for me. But what I'd really like to hear, because I've never heard the story of how you were diagnosed. So I wondered if you could take a couple minutes.
Sure.
For Memoir Moment.
Sure. Yeah,
the Memoir Moment section.
No, happy to. So for me, I think it's a very ordinary experience for a parent, is I recognized my autism when my son was diagnosed by a developmental pediatrician by the school district. Anyways, so for me, it's kind of good that my son Brady was born the same year that Autism Speaks was born. And when I say it's good, it's because it gives me like a view into how long they've been active and doing their thing, because it's exactly as long as my son's been active and doing his thing. And I guess I'll have to say right here that we have not taken advice from that entity. So I didn't take advice from Autism Speaks, but they've been parallel to raising my child. So when I was pregnant with Brady, I never knew the word. I hadn't heard it before, but Autism Speaks, I don't know where they came from or where their funding was or how they loomed so instantly large in the parental footprint, but
I think it's because they were the first and only.
But they really got airtime. Like they were out there. Like if you want to be paranoid about something, who was behind all that? Like, how did they come into being so massively, or did I just miss it?
I think they were the first and only, and they kind of coincided with the dawn of popular adoption of the interwebs.
Okay. So I remember being pregnant and seeing billboards, and the billboard would be like the McDonald's hamburger, but in reverse. It was like 1 in 300 children have autism, and then it was 1 in 225, and after a while it was 1 in 68, and then 1 in 29. Or I'm not sure, but it kept becoming this increasingly popular or recognizable thing, and I was pregnant, and I was like, oh my God, that would be terrible. I would hate to have a child that was autistic. I hope that doesn't happen.
What was your idea of what an autistic child was?
Probably somebody that was banging their head on something, so somebody that was very sad, and like maybe an orphan or the little match girl. Like she would obviously be autistic and on the streets,
Oh my God.
with like blue bags under her eyes from crying, just this wan, lost, pitiable object. So, and I'm not being dramatic, like it sounded bad, and I didn't know what it was. And then of course, then you could say Rain Man, but it didn't, the billboard stuff didn't look like Rain Man. It didn't look like this is someone that's very good at the piano. It just looked like somebody that was bullied at school. Okay. So, and of course, I don't have bad memories of being bullied at school or bullying other people, but I would had a degree of isolation in school, so I can understand that as well. So anyways, it wasn't anything that I wanted to have, and it seemed like something that was coming at all the children. And then when Brady was 2, because my identification diagnosis is wrapped up in his. So anyways, now he's moving through his developmental milestones, and he's not with the other kids. And one day my friend who was in the mommy group with me, and she was a school teacher, former school teacher, because she had taken some time off, she was watching him run around in circles. And she said to me, I think he's autistic. And I remember thinking, our friendship is over. I don't want you to come over to the house anymore. And you're really upsetting me. Because I knew that he was failing at so many things. And I didn't know what it was. And then she said that word that I had already been afraid of, that anybody would have been afraid of, the way Autism Speaks promoted it. So anyways, I didn't want to bring it up again, but it kept being brought up to me by professionals. So anyways, he was diagnosed by a school district intervention type person when he was 4. And she said, well, it's too early to say if he's autistic, but he has PPD, NOS, or I don't
Pervasive
actually,
developmental disorder not otherwise specified.
Yeah, that. So then I went home and I was Googling that. So his diagnosis took a long time and involved a lot of my Googling. And because I'm reading things, and of course I kept going back to the manual, and I would compare him with the checklist, and then I kept reading and reading and reading. And then at some point I was relating to his temper, I was relating to his meltdowns, I was relating to his rigidity, because I was his mom and I was with him all the time. And, a very intimate relationship with your child. He made sense to me. So other people would say, you need to do this. If you have a child doing this, you need to parent this way. And I would think instinctually, no, that's not going to work. And that's going to make it worse. His behavior will become worse if I do what you're suggesting that I should do, the popular suggestion. So then finally one day, he was officially diagnosed. And then I remember I was standing in the kitchen and I thought, I'm autistic too. And I felt really sad. Like my first feeling was such sadness. And I wasn't sad at the word, but I was sad at all the wasted time. I felt so much wasted time because I was like, all of a sudden, things that had never gone smoothly for me, literally never, like things that I could not ever teach myself or get around through determination or cheerfulness or willingness, like just stuff that didn't work for me. And I was like, I wish I would have known this. So you're shaking your head. So did you feel like wasted time? Like,
yeah, I felt like I spent a lot of years blindfolded.
Yeah, so to me, even though the information that was out there and presented to me, the first 50 layers, a lot of it was so wrong. So wrong, not even useful, just wrong. But the fact that I was given a word that said, you have a social and communication disability. And that was almost enough for me. That was so right. That even all the other things, like you can't make a friend and you're disabled, profoundly disabled, and that you're a robot and you don't have empathy, like all that other stuff, I kind of was just like, that's not me. But a social and I forget the other word, developmental
and
rigidity, whatever, all that. I was like, that's so me, that I was like, that's really true. And so then I remember, so when I walked out of the developmental pediatrician's office, and this is a real motivator for me to participate in this podcast and partner with you, and I'm very, very grateful for it and very committed to it, is because the first thing that a parent gets is they get a pamphlet. They're like, here's the DSM. This is your actual definition. Autism is, and then you also get an Autism Speaks pamphlet, because now Brady's 3. So Autism Speaks has been around for 3 years, and I'm a mom. I'm a white suburban mom. So I'm a married white suburban mom. I'm living in a development. So obviously I'm going to get my Autism Speaks pamphlet, because they're looming large. They're having 5Ks all around me. So this is obviously where I'm going to go.
They must be so tired.
From all my 5Ks. I'm tired from being polite about it when other people are like, oh my God, I'm raising money for your son. God love him. Anyways, because I'm not a combative person, so I'll just be like, okay, thanks, good for you, because I know their intention is good, and it's exhausting for me to educate every well-intentioned suburban mom in my periphery that wants to tell me what autism is. They don't want to listen to me, and I have it up until now. I wasn't into educating them. So, anyways. Okay, so my first diagnosis was self-diagnosis. Mm-hmm. My second diagnosis was when I was in my early 40s. I had depression for forever. Since Brady's birth, I had been depressed. He's now like 10 or 11, and things had really come to a head. And so I had gone to a doctor to seek help.
I want to pause just for a second and say, you were depressed in high school, too.
Yeah, I really struggled with depression my whole life. And part of being depressed is you don't really talk about it. It's just like clothes you're wearing. This is the wardrobe of my head. I have lowered feelings. So anyways, I was at the doctor's, I had become suicidal, and the doctor, and not like suicidal where an ambulance came, but just
right.
like I said I need help. And I had said directly, I need help. And so I went to the doctor's, and she prescribed me Prozac, and turns out that I wasn't depressed. I was bipolar. And that matters, because if you're bipolar and you're given Prozac, it'll set off a manic episode. I think that's good for everyone to know. Rule of thumb. If you get Prozac and you feel better the next day, you weren't depressed, you're bipolar, and now you need to really get some help pretty quickly for your mania episode, because they go on for a long time and they're tiring. But in any event, so that was going on. And I ended up, because of the mania and people coming in to help me because I was so disinhibited and, acting out, that I ended up with a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist interacted with me, and he said, so you're bipolar, it's official, and I actually think that you're autistic too. And I had thought that now for 10 years, and I had been reading about it, and I had chosen for me to take advice from the autistic adult community. So when I raised my child, when I looked for understanding for myself, I had not pursued advice from Autism Speaks, which was very prevalent. Instead, I had really researched and Googled to find these little pockets of autistic adult voices, which we're now contributing to, you and I. And I think it's so, so important. So for me, are people going to listen to our podcast? I'm not sure. But is someone at 2 a.m. going to be up at night Googling and find this and listen to it and find some kind of answer to a question that they have that's causing them a lot of distress? I hope so. And I'm pretty sure. Like, if we tag this, someone's going to find it. And so to that person, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. So anyway, so that was my second one. And my third one was like 2 weeks ago. And so now it's during COVID time. And I'm not pursuing another one because my second diagnosis only legitimized or validated what I thought about myself. But in terms of service or anything that I got for being certified, nothing.
There's nothing.
There was nothing. So, and maybe it mattered if I said to my mom, well, it's official, they said this about me, but we were laughing with Katina, where if you say, I'm autistic to anybody in conversation that's neurotypical. It's like, I've injected tragedy into the conversation and I brought everybody down. And they want to change the subject as quickly as possible.
Or they want to convince you that, no, you're not autistic.
No, you seem fine.
Or we're all a little bit autistic.
Yeah, I'm on the, so that's always been a pretty pointless exchange for me too. So having the validation from the psychiatrist, right? What
Your sister Kelly.
what I forget.
We were in your mom's backyard,
Yeah.
and you had gone off to the bathroom. And this was a couple summers ago. I had visited with Carrie and her family in our hometown of Harrisburg. And we were just sitting around a patio table in the back. And Kelly and I were chatting a little bit, and I said, well, it really is because of Carrie that I learned that I was autistic. And I had gotten a formal diagnosis by that point, too. And your sister was like, yeah, she's really into autism. Like it was crystals or tarot or something.
Right. So, and I don't know, like I'm trying to understand, what do our labels matter to other people? And they probably don't, because what a label can do for someone is it can point you towards getting a strategy that you need to live a comfortable, mentally stable life. So
I do think there's some value in the label in terms of workforce protection and forcing the greater population to understand that there is more than one type of neurotypy, and that your neurotypy isn't the only one. And yes, you sense I'm different, but that doesn't mean I don't have every right to be here.
Okay, so I'm glad you said that, because I'm forever short-sighted and self-centered. So you're right.
We're autistic.
Yeah, exactly. So you're right. Yeah. And I saw for the first time an ad that was neurodiverse intentional, and it thrilled me. I was like, wow, could this be the future where an advertisement for a job articulated traits that I very much have? Like, I love doing the same thing over and over again. I love not working with anybody. I love being very involved in a detail that is, something that nobody wants to, like I work with insurance. I work with dental insurance, and I love it. It's the best job I ever had. I'm super, super happy. And anyway, so and I know that my employer is pretty pleased because I bring a level of attention and passion to this that they've never seen before, and they will likely never see again.
I have a pet theory that we really kind of experience, not puberty, but like our real hormonal awakening, maybe a little bit later in life.
Yeah.
And what that means is, like, we have a lot of years where we're not hearing the siren song of mating, which everybody else is. And which is ultimately, no matter what the behavior is, it boils down to, I must go mate. And so I'm skiving off work or school or whatever, right? And we just don't have that. So we're like perfectly content to sit there and fill in, circles with a number 2 pencil.
Widgets.
Yeah. We're like, this is great.
Yeah. Well, and it's not like I ever was interested in dental insurance or ever thought about it, but I didn't, and I don't care about it as a rule, as a topic. I don't care, but it's a place where I can spend 8 hours a day sitting in basically a closet with nobody talking to me and focusing on whatever, this one same thing that's put in front of me every day. I love that. I love that. So you could replace dental insurance and put anything in front of me. If I have all those other attributes, I'm going to be the best person you ever saw in your life. Anyways.
Oops, time to awkwardly transition into a commercial. Sponsored by Same Food, the makers of mush. The same taste, the same consistency, and the same packaging. Every day of your life. This is our promise to you. And welcome back to the Tism.
So the third time was 2 weeks ago, and that has value for relating here, is because Joey and I had been talking about how women present differently than men, and women are frequently overlooked. And my example is my son was given a lot of support and attention in school that was well-intentioned, and some of it was useful. The most useful thing for him was respite. He was given respite. He was allowed to walk out of the room and just take a little breather if he felt like he was overwhelmed and going to have a meltdown. And that made a huge difference for him. In his class was a girl who, to everybody, they were just like, she's difficult. She cries a lot. She gets overwhelmed. She cries a lot. She's too old to cry. Why is she crying? She needs to quit it. Her parents are so permissive. Anyways, so turns out now this young lady has been identified, diagnosed, but her grade school experience was very different from my son. He was recognized. He was respected. She didn't get any of that because she could talk to people and she'd have conversations with you, and you were just like, she's obviously not autistic because, my son's walking around wearing noise canceling headphones, so he had the look. Like you could look at my son and be like, oh yeah. But she same as him. She needed the respite. She absolutely did. And if she could have that, she's so successful during her day. She would have had she ended up being homeschooled because the school day was between her own emotions, being overwhelmed, and then the lack of respect or recognition from every adult. Everything was her fault. Everything was her fault. And she was basically a disagreeable child, which is a terrible way to spend your first 12 years having everybody look at you that way. So anyways, so we talk about that, how that matters for that girl to be seen and given the support that she needs and help to get the strategies that she needs. Because when I have strategies, I do great. Like if I just kind of get a little realigned where I understand when you're saying, how are you today? How are you today? I'm good. Like, okay, I get it. You don't want to hear how I am today. And you don't have time for it. And now that I'm a certain age, I don't have time to hear about how your day is either. So I appreciate now the social transaction of, I'm fine. I get it. It means I notice you, I'm walking past you, and I'm being civil. If someone would have just said that to me when I was younger, then maybe I wouldn't have fought against it for so long. Anyways, so the last time my psychiatrist during COVID, she's going through her notes and she's like, oh, I noticed that when you came in, she's treating my bipolar with medication. I'm stable. It's good. This show is not about that, so who cares? But she said, I noticed from your intake that you have, that you say you're autistic. And I was like,
that's an interesting, she said it like that. You say you're autistic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Even though 2 other doctors have already notated.
Just one. Just
Okay.
one. Me and then my earlier one. But that wasn't anything that she had cared to pursue. And by now she's my 3rd psychiatrist because I had lived now in 3 different states. So my first one was Pennsylvania. The second one in Arizona, she didn't care at all. I told her and she was like, we're not here for that. So whatever. And then this 3rd one, she brought it up. And I was like, is she sort of padding because it's COVID and she's trying to get some hours and now she wants to talk about this? Like, I was a little suspicious about why all of a sudden, after a year, she wanted to explore this. Because one of the things I've learned about psychiatrists, something, is that you're not laying on the couch talking about your childhood, which who wouldn't want to do that, especially if you spent so long being confused about things. I would have been game for an outsider that was educated to give me some insight and stuff. But once I met a couple, they're like, nope, we only want to talk to you about managing your medication, and that's it. So don't go into anything else. So anyway, so she's like, yeah, so let's have another session. So we had that other session, and she's fiddling around. She pulls out this piece of paper. We're over the Zoom, and she reads this piece of paper, and she's like, well, you're not going to remember a lot of this because it comes from, first of all, it was written from the standpoint of asking questions of a child. Because I don't know if there's a diagnostic tool, or at least she didn't, like you're saying ADOS?
Yeah, is an acronym I'm familiar with, and I think there's a couple different versions of it.
Is that written, though, to identify a child, or is that written for a person?
I think there's different ones.
Okay, so the one she had was for a child. And she said, well, you're probably not going to remember all this because you were a kid. And Joey's nodding because I don't know for you out there, but we remember.
I remember everything.
I remember, well, you can't really say you remember everything, but that's what I say. Like, you don't know what you don't know. But I feel like I remember far more than anyone that related to or come across. You know, I've stopped saying to a classmate, oh, you remember when this happened? Because I know they're, one, not going to remember, and two, look at me like, why do you remember? You know, so, so anyways, so she's going through these things and she's asking me questions and I'm answering them honestly. And she's like, she's just like, you don't sound autistic to me because no, that's not it. And that's not it. And so she's like, okay, so do you have a special interest? Do you have something that you know a lot about? And I was like, well, you know, from when you were a child. And I was like, well, you know, I like to read. And she's like, no. And I was like, I read all the time. And she was like, no. I mean, like, you know, something like that nobody really knows, like maybe tornadoes. And I was like, oh, yeah, I loved horses. I was like, I knew everything about horses, like everything. And she's like, no, lots of girls like horses. And I was like, and I was like, well,
Maybe lots of girls who like horses are autistic.
I don't know. Well, and I don't want to like talk her into it because that's not the point. Like, I'm not the educated one here. So I said, well, okay, so let me be specific. I wanted to be a horse, and I was a horse all day long. Like, I woke up in the morning, and I was a horse. I went to school, I was a horse. At recess, I galloped around the playground, and Diane Kiefer put a jump rope around my waist, and she drove me, and that was great. And I was like, so, you know, I loved horses. And she's like, okay, so here's what I'm thinking, Carrie. I had a patient who, he knew everything about tornadoes. And, you know, way, way more than you would expect of a child. So moving on from that. So she had disregarded, you know, my special interest because it wasn't arcane enough for her. And she said, so do you have like a sensory thing? And I was like, oh yeah, you know, I didn't like a tag, you know, in my shirt. And I was like, but everybody feels that way. And that's why, you know, Hanes like prints it on the shirt. And she's like, no, the tag thing. Oh yeah, that's it. So now we're getting somewhere. Cause that's the other thing is she wanted to tell me that I was autistic, which I also thought was not impressive because I think a lot of autistic people are very, very honest and authentic. So I would have been very okay with her sitting down and going through whatever she wanted to go through in a very impartial way. Like that was my expectation.
We're also, most of us will do that gifted child thing where we can feel what answer an interviewer wants.
Right.
And that's true for like a medical or, you know, any of these assessments, like, you know, the Minnesota multiphasic personality, blah, blah, or an IQ test. We're like, ooh, I know the answer.
Oh yeah, I knew what she wanted me to say, and I read so much about it. I knew what I was supposed to, like I could have built a very compelling narrative, but I wanted to hear what she thought, and I wasn't going to skew it. Because also I'm 48 years old and I don't care anymore about, you know, what you think are going to tell me because I've made up my mind. You know, this is a truth for me. And anyways, so she goes through the whole thing and then she says, okay, you are. And I was like, that's it. And she's like, I'm going to send you, you know, we ran a little over today, so I'm going to, you know, send you for the last bit. So paid $43 more. And that was it. But my takeaway was that her identification tool, her diagnostic tool was very male. And it didn't describe my experience. And also she wasn't aware of the fact that she was looking at a male tool. And I did say at least twice, you know, you're looking at something that was written for, you know, for a boy. You know, it's a little different in girls. Like that has entered the zeitgeist. Am I using that word saying that word the right way?
Yeah, I think it's nibbling away at the edges of the zeitgeist. I don't think
Well,
it's reached critical mass
It
yet.
felt like my zeitgeist.
Well.
And she's a psychiatrist, so it should have been in her wheelhouse too. That's a common criticism of an autism diagnosis is that it leaves out girls, it leaves out people of color. You know, it's pretty much just a big fishing net that scoops up white boys. You know, and she should want, you know, if you want to diagnose people, like, you know, see who you're, you know, look at everybody. Don't just look for a white boy. Anyway, so that's my third time. So that was my story. But the best one for me was the one that I got when I came to an understanding about my son. That was immensely meaningful and useful to me. And it was the one I gave myself. So for a person listening out there, if you've done your research and you feel like it's true for you, I'm going to say go with that one, because one that you might seek, you might go to a lot of trouble to go find someone, and the interaction that they're going to have for you, the tool that they're going to have isn't going to be amazing. The education, the medical education, the documentation describing our experience as women on the spectrum is just not there. And maybe in 20 years it'll be better, because we are doing this work right now, and others like us are, other autistic adults are saying no about us without us.
Right.
Have you heard that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted you to do this podcast with me is, I think, just from knowing your story and knowing you and having had conversations with you about how you worked to navigate and help Brady navigate his existence, you've come up with a lot of, I don't want to quite say therapies, but philosophies for
Supports,
interventions,
practical approaches.
And but I think they are very practical, and I think they're very doable for a lot of parents. And what I would say is, Brady is like one of the happiest kids I've ever seen, so it must have worked. Something worked.
The foundation of my parenting with Brady, and hopefully, again, I keep addressing the person at home, but that's who I'm talking to. Like, I'm talking to you, Joey, but I'm really talking to the person that's listening, is everybody wants to feel safe, accepted, and competent. So my child was raised to feel safe, accepted, and competent. So even though he wasn't lining up with his peers, and even though he had something that the DSM said is wrong with you, the medical model said there's something wrong with you, I don't think that any human being should come into an understanding of their own self being treated day in and day out as if there's something wrong with them. That should never happen, because it's very damaging.
And I think that's one of the things we want to stress to our peers. There's nothing wrong with you. And actually,
yeah, you have value.
There's probably more right with you than the rest of the world. That's just my bias.
Well, there's a lot of nice things about autistic people that make them really good humans.
There are. So hopefully we'll be talking more about this and
Sure.
so much more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so easy to talk. It's so easy to talk about, this idea. Because I feel so motivated. Because I'm like, I'm making a contribution because the information is so poor. Like, imagine if I had walked out of that developmental pediatrician's office and I had been pointed to a website or a pamphlet that had autistic adults as the centerpiece of the support. And if that would have, that would have been unbelievable.
Well, a couple of years ago, in-house or residential facilities re-audited who was with them, right? And they discovered hundreds of, it was mainly men, but hundreds of men nationwide who had been diagnosed as schizophrenic and were now in their 60s, 70s, having been institutionalized their whole life, were really autistic. And so they got them out of institutions.
Yeah.
So it's not just, this benefits everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Tune into the TISM next time for our featured guest, Katina Burkett of Katina's Way. The TISM has been made possible by our generous GoFundMe donors and the proceeds from the Pittsburgh Trash Fire tapes. Stories or questions? Send them to TismStories@gmail.com. That's TismStories@gmail.com. I'm Joey Murphy, and with Carrie Thorne Kenny, we are the hosts of the TISM. Have a great day. Okay. Tell them the name of the podcast. You want to hit the microphone?
No, I just like you have all this cool stuff here.
Oh, The only reason I understand it is because I have completely bypassed everything digital and I'm doing all of this with analog equipment.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I need knobs.
Yeah, I need knobs.
Need
Yeah.
knobs.
Yeah, so the Tism.
The Tism.
The Tism. Yep. We're here. We're not going anywhere.
We're here. We're weird.
Yeah.
We've come for your beer. Like, we used to in ACT UP actions in the 90s, we'd go, we're here, we're queer,
Yeah.
we're not drinking your beer.
Yeah.
You know, we'd have a sit-in at a bar or something.
Yep.
We're not drinking your beer.
Yeah. So thanks for listening. Thanks for stopping by.